Thank you. Good evening. On behalf of Whittier College, the Shannon Center, the Music Department, and the Emerson Brand Management, I'd like to welcome you to the Inside Latin Jazz series. Now, if this is your first time here, I should probably take some time to say what it is we're actually doing, what we propose to do with this series. Studying jazz music and teaching it at Whittier College, I learned that Latin jazz, which has been a vital part of the jazz genre and of the American musical landscape, they don't always dedicate a whole lot of, how should I say, page space to the actual sub-style of jazz. And coming from a Latin background, a Latin heritage, I said, boy, there's something funny here. We need to do something about it. And because it's a music that's not really jazz, but at the same time, and it's not really Latin, which is just sort of like subaltern type music, right? No one's paying real close attention to it until recently, where people are tremendously interested in the music because it combines Caribbean rhythms with jazz, right? They're both like cousins from the same root, but it was the first time in the 1940s when Dizzy Gillespie brought in Chano Pozo, and they decided to create music together where Afro-Cubop was created on the spot in New York City. Well, anyways, what I've learned, and part of my work as a musicologist, is to try to begin to reconstruct and document that history with the living musicians that still remain, who sort of have helped create this music and has passed it on to us. So this is one of the things that we propose to do with Inside Latin Jazz. The wonderful thing is that the Shannon Center and the Music Department have been great in terms of being supportive of this work. And I also wanted to try to create sort of like a repository of information where people who are interested in studying Latin jazz actually have a place to go. So we're in the process of trying to create a web page where people can begin to start going to get to this information, especially for musicologists who need a place to find this information. It'll be part of like an oral history program. The wonderful thing that has happened, this is our third year, the wonderful thing that's beginning to happen is that the Grammy Museum has recognized our work, and they're going to partner with us, and we're hoping that the NEA will also see the value of what it is that we're doing, and we're going to have great things that are going to happen on campus simply because people are now beginning to recognize the type of work that's going on in this Inside Latin Jazz. So that's what we propose to do. Also, right, the Shannon Center is a fabulous area, fabulous space in which to do this in. Our idea is to say, if we've got 80 people, that's all we want, right? We're a small liberal arts college, small place. This is what we want. People who are truly interested, and we want the community to become engaged with us with what we're doing here, especially on an off night. So Ron, we got to do this like on a Monday night where people don't go to LA or Orange County. They can actually come here because we actually have a fabulous program. So this is what we're trying to do here on campus. And one of the things that we're very fortunate, one of the people that we're very fortunate to have, which I'm going to introduce to you, is Mr. Jack Costanzo, Mr. Bongo, right? This is a bongo. It's a fabulous instrument, and Jack is an interesting person because he's neither Latino in terms of heritage, and he's not either African American. I believe he's Italian. Is this correct, sir? He's from Italian heritage, and one of the wonderful things about Latin jazz is that as a music, it has always been tremendously welcome to people from outside the culture who could actually partake in the music in many different ways. And Mr. Costanzo he's credited with introducing this instrument, the bongos, to American mainstream society, which is a tremendous thing to have happen, even though this instrument existed in Cuba like 40 years prior to that. He was the first to actually introduce it. And in fact, I think he was the first to actually appear on television performing these instruments. In 1947, he was contracted by Stan Kenton to record with him. And Stan Kenton is another one of those big names in the world of jazz that very few people actually talk about. And he was actually a fantastic arranger and pianist. So we're very fortunate to have with us this evening Mr. Jack Costanzo. And before I have him come out, I want to play some of his music from his latest CD, which is called Back from Havana. It's track number 6 called Milestones. And Jack is a wonderful person, very humble, doesn't like to talk about his accomplishments or his music, but this is the one recording that I've heard him brag about. And so before we meet him personally and he can actually tell us his history, let's listen to his music. exciting music. Can we please welcome Mr. Jack Costanzo? You can come out now, Jack.
Hi, people. Is this my chair of choice?
This is your chair. Yes.
Okay.
Thanks for coming out, Jack.
Thank you for coming. Oh, it's my pleasure. I can't tell you how glad I am. I tell you these things because there you are. His ideas and how he's promoting the Latin jazz and bringing it to more people is really exciting. And I'm so glad that you're doing that, Danny.
Well, I'm just glad that there's people like you that I can actually work with.
I knew his dad's playing on the flute. And I didn't know that Danny was his son. And his dad was what's the word? It's mixed company, or I could tell you the word. He was fabulous. That's a good enough word. Rolando. And he's on an album that I have that I listen to very often called Nuevo Ritmo, the new rhythm. And I didn't know it was his dad until just a few minutes ago, and I'm flabbergasted. If you play like him, you could be my friend for life.
Dad's dad, that's what I say. Anyways, let's talk about your life in music. How did you get started?
I'll tell you how I got started. My mother was very into cold creams and keeping her complexion and skin in good shape. And I started playing with butter knives, and I used to hit the top of the covers of the makeup. And then I found out when I loosened them, I got another different sound. So I started experimenting. I was maybe 9 years old. And I started loosening them, and the guy was getting and I was playing something. I don't know what, but it was something that I enjoyed. And that's how I first started to play rhythm things. And I found that rhythm was within me, a God-given thing, and I'm very appreciative of it. And that's how I started playing or learning about rhythms.
And this was in Chicago, right?
This was in Chicago.
Okay, where in Chicago?
The near north side.
Okay.
North Avenue, which will mean nothing to you. It was in a neighborhood that was quite filled with other Italians. And a lot of things went on there. Gambling in the barber shop in the back which was illegal. And they were sent places that you could go and get whiskey and stuff, and prohibition was in force then, and that was also illegal, but nobody paid much attention to it there. Anyway, that was the neighborhood that I was brought up in, and Al Capone was probably the most famous gangster in the history of that era, and he had control of everything. But there were other people who all were almost that high that we could talk to, and see. And some of them, yes, my family was not a mafia, but he was involved. Some of them were involved somewhat in that. They had tins of alcohol in the backs of their cars. They took home and mixed it with water. They had a gauge that they put in it. It was 75 proof or 80 proof, whatever you wanted. You made the differences in water or alcohol, and then we would fry sugar, and the sugar fried when it melted was how you got the coloring that looked like whiskey. And later on in years, the neighborhood friends started to tell us they'd goodbye and they could smell it and they'd say, "Oh, the Costanzas are at it again." And that's kind of the environment I grew up into. I was used to it, I wasn't frightened of it, and I understood it somewhat, being a young person. And not too many years after that, I became a dancer in ballrooms in Chicago. Not professionally, just a good dancer. God gave me the gift to be a good dancer, and I used it. And I danced a lot.
And how did the dancing take you to that instrument?
That ballroom, we call Mary Garden Ballroom in Chicago, There was an annex ballroom, and then the main ballroom. You couldn't do anything with ballroom dancing and stuff, but the annex ballroom, you could do everything, and everybody wanted to be professional dancers. The girls came down in long, gorgeous gowns and spaghetti straps over. I mean, they were really trying hard to be, because dance teams in that day were very popular. All the nightclubs had them. Usually they have opened the show unless they were a well-known dance team, and then they would have a more respected position. But there was a ton of dancers, and everybody that was dancing in the annex wanted to be a dance team, and I was one of those persons. And I was dancing with people that were 8 and 9 years older than I. I was just a young kid. In fact, that's what they used to call me, the kid. I want to dance with the kid. But nobody kidnapped me.
So what kind of music were you dancing to?
Then Latin had not come into its anywhere near its full force. We were dancing foxtrot, we were dancing jitterbug, and jitterbug was a form of Lindy. Lindy was the first of the jitterbug kind of music, and it was named after Lindbergh when he flew across the ocean in 1927. Then they named this dance after him, called the Lindy, and it evolved into jitterbug, which was very popular.
Right.
And then at that time, the conga. I'm sure, even though you may not have done it, you've heard of the conga. The conga chains, and that's famous. And that became very popular. And so all the dance teams that danced straight dancing, I did not do straight dancing. I did Latin dancing. It was just coming in. Boleros, son, they call it. It was the popular music in Cuba. Before mambo, before cha-cha, and it was way before salsa. This kind of music was being played and starting to. Anyway, the ballroom brought a band in from Puerto Rico called Mario Dumont, and he played it in the annex ballroom when I was in my glory. Anyway, the drummer played on this one number, and he came out in front with a pair of bongos. I had never seen them before in person. And he played the bongos, and my eyes were like that. There was nowhere to buy them. You couldn't buy bongos anywhere in Chicago. There was nobody to teach you to. So I made my own pair of bongos. Butter came in tubes like this, butter tubs, and they were staves. And so I had to cut the staves down to get the bongos, the big side and the small side. The macho, which is the small side, the man, and the hembra, which is the big side, the female. What's unusual about the bongos is the man's doing all the talking. The macho, the small one, is played much more than the deep tone one. And that was an experience, learning to teach myself to play, learning to play. And my first wife and I, my late first wife and I, studied, and we became a dance team. And in a Roomba dance team. The Roomba isn't the right name, but that's what they called it. So we were Roomba dancers. We did Rumba, we did what was called Rumba, actually it was a Huaracha, and we did Bolero, we did an Argentine tango, very poorly by the way, that's not our dance. But I did a lot of this to cover it up.
So that's when all the rhythms started to seep in, right?
Cugat, really, Xavier Cugat, probably most of you have not heard of him. He was the only Latin band that was known in those days, and he played at all the elite hotels. And so the average person, unless they bought his records, would not be able to hear him too much. And I think he's the reason that the music became popular in this country.
Right. My understanding is that he was sort of like the Latin Paul Whiteman. Right, that he was
That's a good
Latin Paul Whiteman, and his band was the most not recorded, but it appeared on more movies.
Paul Whiteman had people in his band that became very famous,
right.
Like Bing Crosby.
Right.
And yeah, you're right. It's probably so.
Right. And he did a lot for exposing the music in films.
Yeah.
He was in a lot of films.
Yeah, Cugat was not an authentic Cuban type band. He played beautiful music. And they had the rhythm, he had all the rhythm section, the conga drummer and the maracas with the ruffles down here. And he had a big show. And the band was beautiful. It just wasn't authentic. And it didn't become authentic until he hired a Cuban named Miguelito Valdez. And when Miguelito, he had to have these arrangements that were authentic because that's the way he sang it.
Right.
And then those tunes that they did were authentic, and the band sounded marvelous.
Right. So the first music was sort of like stylized versions of the authentic music, and then Miguelito Valdez came in, and then he changed it completely so it's
For
more
his
authentic.
songs.
Exactly.
Cugat didn't desert the other ones. They did.
Right.
Now, Miguelito did change Cugat's way of thinking because he would have done the different arrangements. He'd have made the Miguelito sing what he wanted him to sing, which would have been chewy, 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 chewy.
Right.
And so, that band became more, what's the word? More stylized in the music that we knew then was Latin music.
Right.
And Cugat was on the radio all the time. He earned the position of being the father of Latin music in this country. He just didn't have the great bands like we had right after that. Machito, Latin jazz band, Tito Puente, Conjunto, Tito Rodriguez. In today's market, it's Spanish Harlem and Eddie Palmieri, great bands. And better than the bands then because they know more now.
Right.
And I hope that what you're doing will spread like wildfire.
Well, it's slowly doing it. It's slowly getting there.
I truly do.
So when did you start actually playing?
I went in the service. I had bongos in the service. Fooling around.
Where'd you get them? Where'd you get the bongos?
I made them.
So you did make them.
So when I went to New Hebrides, which was a jungle place during the war, and there was no fighting or anything. And I made a deal with a guy to make me a pair of bongos. And he made it out of he glued together different wood colors. And so when I'm on the lathe, I had these gorgeous drums. And that's what I used over there to play. And I played in a lot of USO shows that came, even though I was an aviation ordnance man. I did those things on my own time. And that was nice. It broke it up for me because I was there 20 months.
And you played with a lot of Latin players as well as jazz musicians?
Not then.
Not then.
No, not then.
So that was like your break into beginning.
When I went to New York in 1941, 41, and I was a dancer. I joined a dance troupe, my wife and I, and we worked with them for, a few months, which saved us from starving because we went to New York, we were going to be big stars. New York didn't agree with me. You're not going to be a big star. So we joined this dance troupe, which was working. We got paid. I had hocked my suits. I had hocked the luggage that we had. I hocked it all. So when I worked with this group, I got it all back again. And then we started to get work as a dance team. And the war broke out. And eventually I came back to Chicago and worked there for a couple months and then I joined the Navy. And after that 3-year period, I was discharged and lived in Los Angeles. I taught dancing at the Beverly Hills Hotel in Hollywood and for 3 months. And then I got this job with Bobby Ramos at the Trocadero that I was saying. And there was no other bongo player. It was either me or not having bongos.
There was 2 bongo players, and that one
the other
bongo
guy
player
was busy.
he was out of town, right? Okay. And Bobby Ramos asked you to play, and that started.
Well, he had heard me in a jam session. And he said, "Well, I know he's not going to disgrace me."
Okay.
And so that's how.
So he was impressed with your ability and your talent.
I enjoyed it. I was a rank beginner, and I was a beginner when I joined Stan Kenton. In '47, I joined. We danced at this club, and then I played in the band with Rene Toussaint. Of course, then I had been a professional for a year, and Kenton came in. He'd been auditioning bongo players in New York, and he hadn't found what he was looking for. And he came into the show, and stayed to hear the band. And then he called me to his table and said, "I want you to join the band."
And you were working with Rene Toussaint.
I was working with Rene Toussaint.
Rene Toussaint is a very famous Cuban pianist
And composer.
And composer.
Yeah.
And he arranger as well.
He arranged tons of things.
He's like the Cuban Henry Mancini.
Kenton said, "In 6 weeks, you'll be known around the world." And I thought, because in those days, all the people knew everybody in the bands. They knew how many times they went to the bathroom. They knew everything about that you could know. They knew in those days. That's the way it was. If you had a famous band, they knew all the people in the band. And believe it or not, in 6 or 7 weeks, I was a very well-known person, and I was excited gratified.
Where'd you play?
We did all the concerts, Carnegie Halls, Academy of Music. He broke all the records at all these different halls. Not because of me, but he had a progressive jazz band.
Right.
Yeah. Now when I joined Kenton, at that same time, Chano Pozo joined Dizzy Gillespie. So we were twins. We were with each other, respective bands at the same time. Now, the difference was Chano could play conga drums magnificently, and I was a rank beginner, but I could play jazz. I could play jazz, and I could play it well. And so that was my advantage there. But he had 20 minutes or so of his own with the band. Mm-hmm. And he did the Afro-Cubans. He didn't play jazz. He never played jazz. But he did his own Latin numbers, and he tore the house down. He tore it down, no matter where they played. And I got some notoriety with Kenton, like I say, but I had a number called Bongo Riff, which was written without any knowledge of a Latin rhythm section or anything. It was, it's a flash thing. Mm-hmm. And I did it. I don't like the record too much, but people seem to like it. I don't think it's very good. In any event, it was very flashy. And played really no Latin rhythms in there, which one I would have died to have. But Pete Rugolo didn't know rhythms then. Pete Rugolo was the main arranger for Stan Kenton, and he arranged and wrote this song, but it had no feeling of Latin whatsoever, and I had to fake my way through it. I don't think I did well, Danny. I really didn't.
Well, you certainly did extremely well, because people recognize this at the beginning of your professional trajectory.
Well, sometimes you're lucky.
Luck is a big part of it. Yes.
I did become a drummer of bongos and conga drum, of which I'm not ashamed. And I've done hundreds of recordings with many artists. I was lucky. I played with Sinatra. I played with Judy Garland. I did TV shows with them. I was dear friends with Marlon Brando, and I gave Gary Cooper. Some of you might remember Gary Cooper, or at least have heard the name. And I gave him conga drum lessons. Mm-hmm. So I had a full Hollywood life. I didn't drink, I didn't do drugs, and I don't smoke. I've never done any of those things, for which I'm grateful. Couldn't resist a good-looking woman, though.
Well, do we have a recording of your work with Stan Kenton that we could listen to?
I don't have it.
You don't have it?
No, it's on 78s, and I don't have a 78 player anymore.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, what can I? Yes, I have it. I have Bongo Riff. I have Peanut Vendor, which is the biggest number he ever did. Mm-hmm. And that was interesting about Peanut Vendor. We had a rhythm section, Shelly Man, but for Peanut Vendor, he hired the conga drummer from Machito, famous big band, and he hired Machito. Machito played the maracas. Carlos Vidal, the name of the conga drummer, played the conga drums, and the bongo player with Machito, because I was there, he couldn't get to play bongos, poor thing. He played cowbell, and that's how the Peanut Vendor was done. And it's probably the most outstanding single that Kenton never recorded. To this day, people remember that song. It was done on 47. What's that? 50-some, 60 years ago almost. And it's still popular.
And that was a very popular composition.
And I was pleased. I didn't play much on it, but I was pleased to be on it.
That's
Because
fantastic.
I didn't play where I thought I could play well for a couple of years. That took me time.
Fantastic.
But when I got to where I wanted to be, I was very comfortable.
Fantastic. So after Stan Kenton, what did you do? Where did you go?
I went with Nat King Cole for 5 years.
Oh, incredible.
And then I was playing conga drum. I didn't.
You had graduated.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't that I graduated. The conga drum is a very good rhythm instrument. If you're going to play something with time, conga drum is good. Bongos are the salt and pepper of the rhythm section. It's a little different. And with Nat, I played almost always conga drum, and I loved it. Now, we did record songs with bongos when I first joined, because he wanted to take advantage of some of the notoriety that I had gotten with Kenton.
Okay.
So, and he wrote a song, and I wrote a song. We wrote a song with it called Go Bongo, and it was almost as bad as Bongo Riff. But I had the time of my life with Nat. He was such a gentleman, and we did go through a disaster when he took the Southern tour.
Okay.
And it was very, maybe we don't even have to talk about that, right?
We probably shouldn't talk about that.
I didn't hear you.
We probably shouldn't talk about that. It's okay. I mean, did it affect your music?
I don't think so. What happened was we went down south, and they didn't let Nat King Cole stay at any of the hotels. And I was able to stay at the hotels. And that way. So here's this big star and superstar living with families and in black hotels that were not very nice. And I finally I couldn't stand it anymore, and I stayed in the black hotels because it was ridiculous the other way around. And I was more comfortable. I think number one. Number two, they had a ball. Those hotels were cooking, burning, steaming, boiling every night.
There was good music going on in there.
Oh yeah, and and they were very. They remind me of Cubans in that sense. They were a very happy people, and are a happy people, because I don't want to leave out today, but the blacks are much more respected now, than then.
But you could hear the exuberance in the music. It's there, right?
Yeah. Well, in those days, a rhythm and blues band, black band, you could tell it was a black band playing by the way it felt, the way they played everything in those days. And now today's environment, a white rhythm and blues band, you can't tell whether it's black or white. They reached that stage.
Well, some of the greatest recordings that were recorded on Atlantic Records, with people like Aretha Franklin and Ray Charles and folks like that, they were recorded by musicians that weren't African American. The rhythm section wasn't African American, but like I tell my students in the classroom, it's not it's not what you are racially, it's what you are culturally. You know what I mean? So it's a kind of thing where it's like, if you grew up in an environment where you listen to music a certain way, you respond to it a certain way, it's more a learned behavior than actually anything else. You're actually doing that, and it comes out that way. And that's what I think is fascinating about American music, that with time, right, those ideas of, you sound like a black person, or you sound like those ideas are no longer there. It's actually, we're becoming more and more American of what we're about.
It has to be said that it took time for the white musician, most of them, to reach the level of certain kinds of music that the blacks already were there, because it was their music. Rhythm and blues, I don't care. It's considered a easy music. It's not considered a complicated music, but it's a music that came from the blacks. And it's a music that I love. I truly love rhythm and blues.
It's great music. It's great dance music.
And I go to see rhythm and blues band whether they're white, black, or blue, because I don't, because they're going to all be good. It's not, we don't have that difference anymore.
Right.
And I wanted the record you just played of my record, of Milestone. The trumpet player on there is named Gilbert Castellanos. I think he will be one of the great trumpet players on our country. He's just absolutely marvelous, and I wanted to mention that because I heard him on the record and I said, oh, look at him go.
Oh, Gilbert sounds great.
Oh, you know Gilbert?
Of course I know Gilbert. I knew Gilbert when he was like 10 years old.
Oh my goodness gracious.
And he became like a young lion. And he still practices something like 10 or 12 hours a day. So he's...
Oh, I better tell him I saw you.
Yeah, he's a fantastic musician.
He is an all-around drummer. He can play off-the-wall jazz. He can play regular jazz. He can play Latin. He can play rhythm and blues, whatever it is you want. And he plays it all first class. And you've got to say, this man is going to do something.
Absolutely. So Jack, let's listen to some music, some more music.
What do you want to play? Tell me the style you want to hear.
I want to hear
If I
some
didn't
more
record it, I'll do
Latin
it.
jazz. I want to hear some more Latin jazz.
All right. Latin jazz. You got the record back from Havana, which is, to me, the best record I've ever made. There's Jive Samba, that Adderley tune.
Let's do the Jack Samba.
It's a slower tempo,
Yes.
but it was a big hit in Europe, and the United States ignored it completely.
Well,
I wrote the bass
we're in the
part.
world of art music, and sometimes we don't pay much attention to it.
I wrote the bass part.
Okay.
I'll take credit for that.
Can we listen to the Jack Samba, please? So it's an arrangement.
It was arranged originally by Jay Torrey.
Okay.
Saxophone player. You might have heard of Jay, I'm not sure. He was with Buddy Richard, with Jerry James, and they stole him both times.
Turn it up a little bit. Such a bluesy kind of slow R&B feel to it.
That hasn't been wrote that way.
Yeah. Can you turn it up a little bit?
Yeah, Thank you.